for better weather in Chicago today.
Yeah, you
all right.
Wow.
Let's go on an adventure. Hey, babe. Adventure short.
I put on a life jacket here. Well, let me introduce the crew as well. Like I said, I'm Ryan. We've got Justin as our first mate up at the very top. Give it up for Justin.
Justin.
And also give it up for John, our captain here. Give it up for John. Let me show you how to put on a life jacket here real quick. It'll save your life in case of an emergency. Question is that speaking of hypothermia, how cold is the water actually? I don't really have a temperature read on the water throughout the year, but I can tell you that obviously because it takes a while for the sun to be able to warm up this giant lake that stretches 300 miles north and south, about 118 east and west, it takes all the way into about September for the water to actually feel good. On really hot days, obviously, it's nice to jump in the lake, but to stay in there for a long time, it's still pretty cold. It takes about August to September where the water actually warms up. But how cold it is right now, I can't tell you. But indeed, a lot of people also ask me, does the water freeze all the way through within the winter time? Kind of. Up here closer to the front or closer to the lake shore, it actually breaks apart. It does freeze within spots, but there's certainly space in between where the water doesn't necessarily freeze all the way through and connect all those pieces of ice. Further out, it does seem to be, as far as I can tell, all frozen out there. Unfortunately, you can't see it now, but all the way out here in Lake Michigan, maybe you can. If you're really looking up, you might be able to see the south end of the city, not to mention the fact the steel mills of Gary and Hammond, Indiana. So you can be able to see all the way across state lines out here in
The Bears.
Gonna be happening. As a matter of fact, I've been reading about that as well. Here's something that, I'm totally not quite up on the Bears and what's going on with that, but the whole reason that is a problem is because Chicago's landmass all the way along the coast is all public land. It is public land. It is not meant for any kind of private enterprise. This was something that they put within our rules here within the city, specifically with our zoning laws, even before this was incorporated as a city. It claimed that the lakefront would forever remain clear and vacant, or forever remain free and clear of any private enterprise. So the Bears over there at Soldier Field have been renting that space through all this time. Been renting that space as it is a part of the Chicago Parks District. They rent that from the city. So now they got enough capital that they were like, well, why don't we just build a stadium right next door? And it created, once again, that long-going argument, conversation, if you will, about what is actually meant for the public and what is meant for private enterprise. Since the Bears are essentially their own private group, they said absolutely no. The city's saying absolutely no. To Brandon Johnston's credit, this is our mayor, saying that no, we're trying to build this thing, trying to get it negotiated. But indeed, I don't know, a rule is a rule, I guess. Not to sound super conservative about it all, but it's there for a reason. And everybody throughout the history of this city, people have been trying to manipulate what is actually public and private enterprise here along the lakefront.
Yeah.
But you just said the Bears, and that is because they want to move them to either Hammond or Gary, becoming the Gary Berries, or they will become the Arlington Heights Bears. One thing I do want to mention too, sort of a somber note to our tours, is there was something right across from the Reed Murdoch building. This was the disaster of the USS Eastland. Now the USS Eastland, it was a boat that per regulation after the Titanic had to have so many lifeboats on it, and also was very, very empty at its base and very top heavy. They had replaced all the concrete, or all the wood was something like concrete on the top of it. So very, very top heavy boat. It was docked up over there on the river, close to the Reed Murdoch building, getting ready to allow people onto the boat from the Western Electric Company. They were getting ready to take basically a picnic day over there in Michigan City, Indiana. Unfortunately, like I said, that boat was super top heavy. People piled onto the boat very quickly, got one side, the whole thing capsized and killed about 844 people. That is more passengers than the Titanic. A lot of the Titanic The people who perished in that were actually the crew as opposed to truly passengers on it. More passengers perishing on the, on the USS Eastland than the Titanic. The reason I bring up this ghastly event is because there was a young man by the name of George Hallis who worked for the Western Electric Company, and he was running late that day. George Hallis running late that day to be able to get on the boat, the Eastland, for that day. Running late, missed the boat, and then ended up saving his life.
Yep.
He ends up
I dropped something.
Yeah,
with his life being saved, ends up taking to this new street game that they called football. Studied it really hard, opened up a franchise called the Bears, exploited the talents of the quarterback, and developed that to the way we know football as it is today. Not only starting the Chicago Bears as we know it, but also the NFL, basically, as we know it today. So that's, and you know, it's a sad thing to think about, you know, if that was that one guy's life, and look at all that he was able to create with that. Again, about 100 or 844 people perishing on that. Who knows what their lives would have become as well.
Wow.
So, a little bit about that now that you said the Bears, allowing me to just like talk about that. We're here in the Chicago Harbor Locks. Now, we just had a series of gates that closed right behind us. These gates are slowly opening right here. We're the only boat that is here on the locks. Over the weekends, you can be able to see it get really, really busy in here with fire boats, large crafts like these, even jet skis. Everybody kind of sharing the space. Those jet skis right next to giant cruisers hanging out for dear life. But these gates are opening up right now. The water is descending down onto the level of the river. And when we come back, the adverse is going to be true, or it's going to be the same thing. These things are gates are going to close, and when those gates over there open, it's going to be allowing water from the lake to come into these locks, and we will be elevating ourselves to the level of the lake. There's about a 4-foot difference between the lake to the river, so this whole thing going up and down like a giant elevator of water. And that's a little bit as to the reason of our Chicago history. Can anybody tell me why Chicago became what it is today, the metropolis that it is? Anybody got a guess?
Location, location, location.
You're very right about that. She said location, location, location 3 times in a row. And specifically, give it up for this person right here. Know what they're talking about. Which is what it is with everywhere, right? It's also the reason why St. Louis didn't grow as it could have, because they had a big head start on us, them becoming a fur trading post all the way back in the 1760s. We became incorporated as a city in 1837, so they had all that head start on us, and we end up becoming what we are today. And again, it is because of our location as to where the river meets the lake. Basically, there were these French guys by the name of Alain Ribaud, or excuse me, I'm messing up that name, Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet, who were traveling from Canada, went all the way over to the Green Bay, Wisconsin area. This was in the 1670s, by the way. They were looking for a way to be able to get down into the Mississippi River. So again, traveling from the Great Lakes all the way to Green Bay, Wisconsin, traveling south and then east, coming back around. And what ended up happening was they hit this thing called the Subcontinental Divide. They had to portage across the soft crescenting of land, in which when the rain hit this body of land, water rushes from one end to the Atlantic Ocean and towards the west to the Mississippi. So they knew they were getting close to that Mississippi River. They went back to their French continent, to their government, and they said, listen, if you were able to create a canal space between these two rivers, what's now the Des Plaines and the Chicago River, and build a town right there, that town would grow and grow to become a port city, and it would become the, and I quote, cornerstone of our French Empire. But unfortunately, it did not go to the French. It went to us, and that's because their boats had capsized on their way back to Canada, and it destroyed everything that they would have to be able to prove this to the Canadian government, specifically any journals or maps that they had. But I would say that they were largely correct that this land had absolute opportunity to grow. A lot of people don't think of Chicago, Illinois as a port city, but this being the quote-unquote third coast, indeed it was. We had ships coming through this area from the Great Lakes all the time. Not to mention the fact that the Erie Canal had been built, creating a thorough route from the Great Lakes to New York City. So as New York grew, Chicago would grow as well. And we had all these different natural resources to be able to create this city to what it is today. Tons and tons of prairie grass, some foot, like 6 to 7 feet above your head. Cutting that down, grinding it up, turning it into grain, and we would put it on the backs of these ships and trains and ship it all over America. That's another thing. This was the nexus of railroads after a time. Nexus of railroads, at least 9 different lines coming in and out of Chicago, delivering all of these products throughout the Midwest and America as well. We had a ton of lumber coming all the way from Wisconsin. We're chopping that lumber up, putting it into sizable pieces that you can be able to build houses with, and shipping it all over the Midwest. Chicago is responsible for what the Midwest looks like today. And of course, we had the Union Stockyards 17 years after the Board of Trade was established in 1848 to be able to trade all of these commodities that much more fairly. 17 years after that, yeah, the Union Stockyards, where we have just acres and acres of cattle and pork that we are, you know, obviously slaughtering and putting onto refrigerated train cars and delivering them all over the United States. I believe it would take something like anywhere between a half of a week and a full week if you had a cow and had that slaughtered to be able to get the meat. Here we were able to turn so much meat over in an entire day that it was able to feed all of this country.
Wow.
So anyways, I say all of this really quickly because what it ended up happening was we did not have germ theory here in the city at the time. What ended up happening was we ended up polluting this river so badly that it was poisoning us. If you know anything about rivers, water flows out into the largest body of water that it is closest to, and that would be Lake Michigan. We are taking our water from Lake Michigan, we're drinking it, and it's poisoning us. We were the cholera capital of the world all the way in the 1880s. So basically, long story short, as to why we have this lock system right here is because we reversed the flow of the river. We had to do something with all of this dirty water. Didn't know quite how to clean it, but we knew that we needed to get rid of it. By reversing the flow of the river, we did so. And how we did it was by dredging a canal 28 feet long near the original canal that we made. This was the sanitary and ship canal, and we dug it about 100 feet under the ground. 100 feet that, of course, by that subcontinental divide, remember that I talked about, because we knew about that, we knew that the force of gravity would begin sucking the water into the opposite direction, digging that canal strip so deep. So it started to suck all this dirty water in the opposite direction, much to the jargon of the people of St. Louis. They were receiving all of our dirty water. And not to mention that, but this is the true reason why we have that lock system, not just to regulate the traffic of what's going on, but to regulate how much water we're sending downstream. That lock system wasn't there for 33 years after the canal had been built. We're sucking up so much water that Canada ended up suing Chicago, Illinois, because their beaches were getting bigger and bigger with less and less water. That's how much was being taken away from Lake Michigan. So that's a little bit of why we have the lock system and a little bit of our history. But we are here to talk about buildings, so I'll be intersplicing a little bit of history in with this tour. Let's talk about this building right here. To our right-hand side, we are looking at Lake Point Tower, one of the, if not the only building that we have that is on the other side of the lakefront. The other side of the lakefront. All again, once again, this is all private, all public land, not meant for any kind of private enterprise. So how did we get this building right here? Well, it's because at the very base of it, there was a public parking garage. Some developers purchased that land, they put those columns all the way around it, and put a slab of concrete on the top of those columns and started to build in the air. The city tried to intervene and say, listen, you're not supposed to be building a building on what is public land. They said, we're not building on the land, we're building a building in the air that exists above the public land. So that's how they ended up getting it, exploiting a loophole within our zoning laws. We made sure to close that up to make sure something like that never ever happens again. But with Lake Point Tower, you can imagine a lot of affluent people live within that building. Oprah was always rumored to have lived in it, but she liked to go to the restaurant that used to be at the very top of it, called Cité, and people just started to assume that she lived in the building, told everybody, but she never actually did. She lived in the Water Tower Place a little bit north of here. Now this building here on your left-hand side, this is an example of contextualism. Contextualism architecture, meaning that the building matches the context of everything that came before, or pays homage to everything that came before. Notice that the hue of the building matches the hue of the river, not to mention, by optical illusion, sort of waves all the way down. That's to mimic, of course, the waves of the lake and that of the river. This is the St. Regis Hotel and Vista Tower. St. Regis Hotel, obviously hotel space and private condominiums. This is the third tallest building in our skyline, the #1 tallest building in the world that was built by a female architect. Her name is Jeannie Gang. Studio Gang is her architectural firm. Look up at the very top really quickly while the sun's behind the building. You see that it's wide open there at the 83rd floor. Architects have to deal with something called drift. It's when the wind is going to hit a building and the building's going to sway back and forth. So they got to figure out ways to be able to deal with how something so tall is going to move around at the very top. In this case, they just allowed that 83rd floor to be wide open to allow the wind to blow through the building, and that's what stabilizes it at the very top.
Wow.
Again, St. Regis Hotel and Vista Tower. The middle tower up at the very top of it had a penthouse that sold for $19.5 million. So it's a very expensive real estate inside of that building. 2 doors down from it, we're looking at this triangular building. This is the Swiss Hotel. Triangular building built by Harry Weiss, who was a sailor in his young life. So all of his buildings have this triangular theme to them, like the sail of a boat, if you will. Triangular buildings are interesting because you can keep the buildings, the buildings, rooms, the size in which you want them to be, but you cut down on hallway space. You can get from one end of the building to the other that much quicker. Especially important in prisons, hospitals, and any other kind of government building. What were you pointing at over there? The church. Are we? Oh, yeah. Is that the flying buttresses that you see up at the very top? No idea. I'll point that out. I think you were talking about the Chicago Tribune building, but let me know when we're getting close to it. I'll talk about this white building before we get in view of it. This is the Wrigley building. This building built off of the profits of chewing gum. Yeah. This was Wrigley baking powder, was being sold at the World's Fair in 1893. We have a ton of products that we still utilize to this day coming from the World's Fair. And Wrigley baking powder, when you purchase the baking powder, they gave you a complimentary stick of gum to go along with your purchase. Brand new thing in the world. People trying out gum, they love it. They bring it back to their hometowns. Grocery stores get a hold of it. It's flying off the shelves, and this whole building built off of the profits of chewing gum. That's all 250,000 terracotta tiles all the way across it. Starts off at a darker cream color at the bottom. It gets wider and wider all the way up to the staircase crowning and the clock tower. Is this the building you were talking about, the church? That is actually the Chicago Tribune building. Is condominiums now, but it was pumping out the newspaper for decades on end. Sort of a hybrid building. Yes, church looking with that Gothic style of architecture at the very top and Art Deco all the way through. That building has a ton of different other buildings inside of it on the facade. I'm talking about World Trade Center, even pieces of the Moon, Taj Mahal, all kinds of different buildings built on its facade. Going back to this though, if you were to spray a high pressure hose on the Wrigley building, it would break apart that precious terracotta. So this whole building is hand wiped down once a year. How about that? It was the very first office space in the world to have air conditioning. And at the very base of it has the Billy Goat Tavern. If we know anything about the Billy Goat Tavern, that's a hamburger joint where John Belushi and Bill Murray made fun of it in that SNL sketch with a cheeseburger.
Oh, yeah.
Also those people putting a curse on the Cubs that lasted all the way until 2016 when they finally won their World Series. Right next to us, Trump International Hotel and Tower. This building, 1,300 feet up in the air. It's our second tallest building in our skyline. Another example of contextualism in that the heights of the buildings around it match the setbacks to the building. This building built by Adrian Smith, who designed the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Very similar structure to this. So think Trump Tower and another Trump Tower should give you the idea of the height of that building. That one going all the way 2,800 feet up in the air. Hi there, how are you? And we're looking at Marina City Towers right here. These are these corncob buildings that we see, corncob shaped looking, I suppose. Bertrand Goldberg ended up building this, who believed that buildings should provide people with the amenities that they need to live inside of the buildings. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a mass exodus from the downtown area to the suburbs. And the city was looking for ways to be able to keep that middle class tax bracket here in the downtown area. But again, they had to provide them with amenities to be able to live because all of this was very commercial space. So this building has everything you'd ever need to live inside of it. Place to park your boat, park your car, got a restaurant right over here with all these lovely people. Not to mention a concert hall on the other side. Had a grocery store inside of it, even an ice skating rink and bowling alley for a time. Now, two people have drove out of this building into the river. You can be able to see this in the movie The Hunter, 1973. Steve McQueen chasing a guy in a tow truck, and he got him all the way out of the building. And as a matter of fact, you can be able to see the cast of Blues Brothers on State Street who had heard that they were going to be doing this. So you can be able to see the whole cast there watching it happen in the film. And also those Allstate commercials. Protect yourself from mayhem like me. He drove a car out of that building and into the river. So yeah, I was being a little facetious. It wasn't people like you and I. It was for television and film, quite obviously. 1919's Reed Murdoch building here on the right-hand side. This is an example of prairie-style architecture, short, flat, and long within the building. But check this out. This is an asymmetrical building. Can you tell? You got a column right here, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 base of windows. And then you got the column with the clock tower, the 1, 2, 3, 4 base of windows. 5 base of windows as opposed to 4, and then that final column. Notice that the brick on this final column doesn't necessarily match the brick on the rest of the building. What happened was they wanted to widen the South Street right above us. So in doing so, they shaved off the side of the building and rebuilt it to match the other side. That is also the international headquarters of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow, right?
Young people don't even know what that is.
They don't even know what it is, yeah. Some, and you know what, it's funny, she said young people don't even know. Some do because they still have to do the research on the internet for things, so they might look up the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's a sad story with them because they ended up just like swearing by the books instead of trying to get ahead of it and get on the internet. So maybe too little too late, but they still are utilized. And their headquarters right over there in the Reed Murdoch building. Here on our right-hand side, this building is absolutely enormous. This is the Merchandise Mart, constructed in 1930 as the wholesale warehouse for Marshall Fields. This was a retail giant before it was acquired by Macy's within the past 20 years. 4.2 million square feet of land. Used to have its own zip code. Even has a fire department inside of it. Still has 2 train stops as well. This is Art Deco architecture. You got these deep inset windows that are drawing our eye up to the staircase crowning. Not to mention ashlar limestone from Bedford, Indiana. Tons of different metallic elements all over it, and chevrons for the ornamentation. Bigger and bigger, more and more strength, and America just seemed to be on the up and up. That building was bought and sold by the Kennedy family. Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch, ended up purchasing that in the 1940s, and then also purchased all this land that we see around us, ended up selling it in the 1990s. This is Wolf Point. This is where the main branch of the river meets the north and the south as well. This used to be a fur trading post in Chicago's humble beginnings, all the way back in the 1810s, where people came here to do one or all 3 of the following things: be completely isolated from the rest of America, as this wasn't even American territory, barely at that point. Not to mention the fact they wanted to trade fur or drink themselves silly at any one of the 3 taverns that they had here. They also had a hotel, but no schools, no churches, no nothing like that. So you can only imagine the kind of trouble they were getting into back then. All the structure that we see that is glass is basically about 10 to 15 years old at this point. I'm going to talk about this building on the right-hand side for a little while. This is 150 North Riverside. 150 North Riverside that comes down to a point of about 28 square feet. The reason why is obviously we're here on the river on one side, but it also has railroad tracks on the other side. How they did it is fascinating to me. They were able to... That was interesting. I just got waved at by somebody else from another boat. Whatever. 28 feet or 28 inches or feet in diameter. These things called caissons. All concrete, steel within the middle. Drove it down to about 120 feet underneath us. That's where the bedrock exists. If If you wanted to build a building in New York City, it takes about 2 feet and you hit bedrock and you can start building from there. This is all very swampy area originally, so you got to go all the way 120 feet down to hit the bedrock, and that whole building that comes to a point is secured with on that thin 28 foot diameter, 28 foot square foot area. The caisson's going all the way down to it. I'll talk a little bit more about it on the way back because I'm stuttering right now. Excuse me about that. Over here on our right-hand side, we are looking at the 2 North Riverside Plaza. This building built in 1929 by Halliburton and Root. As I told you a little bit earlier, this entire river was so disgusting with all the different debris and animal carcasses, to be frank with you, from the cold refrigeration storage buildings and factories and warehouses all along here. Most of the buildings that were being built had their backs turned away from the river. In this case, they put this plaza right there because they figured that one of these days this river was going to be cleaned up and people would want to enjoy the river from a plaza. So we celebrate their foresight over there at 2 North Riverside Plaza. It just got its landmark status here in the city of Chicago. It was originally the publishing house for the Chicago Daily News, which is no longer in publication. Now, how we got from Art Deco architecture to the present day is all exemplified here on this right-hand side. A little bit of history lesson for us as we are passing up Gateway Center number 1 and going to Gateway Center number 2. We got Art Deco through the 1920s, the middle class being more and more strengthened, and then the stock market crashes and it is time for the Great Depression. Once America finally gets out of the Great Depression, now it's on the onset of World War II. Once we finally get out of both of those things, it had been like a 26-year period where virtually no commercial office space was being built at all. So when the architects returned to building buildings, they're building these black box modernism. Thrifty, frugal, very conservative in their approach, getting it back to the basics. No ornamentation on the buildings whatsoever. A very functional building inside of it. You start to soften up this look and give a little bit more ornamentation into the international style. That's this building right here, built in the 1970s. This is the Gateway Center number 3. The only ornamentation that is on this building is the paneling all the way across it. So still in its structure, basically a black box building. International style sounds like what it is. You can take the building, place it anywhere in the world. It is not in conversation with the surroundings like Gateway Center number 4. That is contextualism. It pays homage to everything that came before it. Notice that the building curves along with the curvature of the rivers. That's how you get from Art Deco to present day, all on this right-hand side. But folks, we're going to get this boat straightened out, and right now you are looking at the Sears Tower in between these 2 buildings.
Yep. Get
your cameras out. I see that we already have them, but this is your opportunity to get a good shot of the Sears Tower, Willis Tower to some of us.
Oh, there it is. That's where the sky deck is, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see him right there.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
I know, right?
Oh.
Now the tilt is in the John Hancock. That's what that is. This is sky deck. If you look up all the way at the top, you see these protruding
They
glass.
can stand on the glass.
Stand on the glass and look all the way down. Yeah. And
That's our next trip.
I'm sorry.
That's our next stop.
That's the next one. Apparently, we should just get back. I don't know if you guys heard that. We established that is sky deck, and she asked, is the tilt up there? The tilt is in the John Hancock building, but the sky deck is protruding glass boxes that go out of the Sears Tower about 5 feet, so you can be able to look down all the way 1,400 feet, all the way down to the ground. No thank you for me personally, but it's basically made out of like layers of glass. And just recently, one of those layers inside of it had actually broke, and they said, hey, no, that's okay. They're designed to do that. I'm like, the glass is designed to break? Forget it. I can't wrap my mind around any of this. But indeed, that goes all the way up 1,451 feet up in the air, the entirety of the building, the whole thing. And it is built off of bundled column technology. May I also add, before I explain that, building is still the tallest building in our skyline, #1 tallest building in the world from 1973 to 1998. I believe it is number 2 in America. The only one exceeding it is One World Trade Center in New York City. Bundled column technology, or bundled tube technology, is essentially, if you were to build a building that tall in the air in just one straight shot, it'll eventually break in the middle. So they bundle columns at the very base of the building all the way through the midsection to the top, and that's what gives it its structural soundness to be that tall. The Burj Khalifa in Dubai and International Trump Hotel and Tower both working on that principle of design. 2 people have actually scaled that building too, all the way from the bottom to the top, climbed up the whole thing. A guy by the name of Dan Goodwin did it with suction cups
Spider-Man.
on his hands and feet. You know a lot. He was Spider-Man. Spider Dan. He wore a Spider-Man outfit when he did it. And also Alain Rabot, French guy, 1999, who climbed up the whole building with just his hands and feet. Unbelievable. This building is the Civic Opera building. Now, people ask me, the V and the U are interchangeable in Latin, so that was a stylistic choice to essentially misspell the word building. We definitely know how to spell the word building in Chicago. But this building they nicknamed as Insol's Throne, the guy who created all of the funding for the Civic Opera building to be built. His name was Samuel Insol. He made his fortune off of consolidating all the electric companies and the railroad companies as well. Unfortunately, this building having to close right after it opened because of the Great Depression. But it had a 4-story lobby space and was the very first stage in the world to be retractable, one which would go up and down with the scissor lift.
Wow.
And I did a little research about performances inside of the Civic Opera building. Can anybody guess the only rock and roll concert that has ever taken place in there? We can have a conversation on what rock and roll is or not, but I am talking about a classic rock and roller performing.
The Who?
The Who, I hear that often. No one, by the way, no one has guessed this yet. No, it is not The Who. Tick, 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 tick. It was Jimi Hendrix.
Oh.
February 1968.
Nice. Look at Jimmy.
So one last thing about this building over here on our left-hand side. I love talking about this building, 150 North Riverside. Up at the very top of the building, of course, architects have to deal with something called drift. It's built on that very narrow foundation of 28 square feet with those caissons all the way through the middle of it. The building is going to sway one direction to the other, so they have something called tune slosh dampers at the very top of it. Essentially, giant pools of water, 160,000 gallons of water up there, that when the building sways this way, water rushes to the other side of it to be able to stabilize it, like a shock absorber going back and forth all day and all night up there. On the other side of that brick building was the site of the Wigwam. This was a political venue that the Republican National Convention chose dark horse candidate Abraham Lincoln to be their nominee for the presidency, and he ended up winning the 16th one. Here on the left-hand side, we see this building with the parabolic arches. That actually works as the gutter system. That is River Point. But notice that sculpture right there, that red one, that sort of spirals, that is Constellation by Santiago Cravatelli. I'll be talking about him at the very end of the tour with a building that he wanted to build. But Santiago Cravatelli right there. Your right-hand side, we are looking at another example of contextualism. That's just kind of how this is when you're here in Chicago and trying to build these contextualism buildings. They're going to have a lot of repeating themes. That the glass matches the river, not to mention that the shape of the building will match the curvature of the river most of the time. So that's kind of how we do it over and over again. This building built in 1983, and you can see it in a movie that was filmed right after that in 1986, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This is the quintessential Chicago movie, probably got to be in the top 5 ones that people think of when they think of Chicago. That's where his father worked. His father worked inside of that building. Here's a commotion going on outside. Steps directly up to the window, looks down, and sees his son parading through what is supposed to be Wacker Drive, but actually was Dearborn Avenue in real life. That's where the Daily Plaza is, that Picasso statue that you can be able to see. So if you're an aficionado of that movie, you can be able to see it from there. By the way, real quick, is my microphone going in and out? I'll try to keep this. Yeah, it is. Okay. But you guys can all hear me, especially in the back. Okay, good. Yeah. What? And we're back here on the main branch. Make sure you take as many pictures as you can because this is an absolutely lovely view as we continue to go east here. Over here on our right-hand side, this is the river walk. We have a couple of boats planted right there, but you can be able to see these native grasses and flowers that are growing out of the river. That is called the jetty, encouraging the ecosystem underneath there. So this thing acts as basically like a giant fish hotel around here. We've always had a river walk in the city of Chicago, but virtually no one ever used it. No one ever used it. It was part of something called the 1909 Plan of Chicago, which gave us a ton of different cultural and social institutions that we have here today and made it a more functional and beautiful city. Basically, we took a lot of our city planning and architectural cues from Paris. They wanted to make this a Paris on the prairie, quote unquote, and they gave us this river walk as well. But the problem with it wasn't planned as well as it could have been. Basically, if you were using the river walk and you were walking from one end of the block to the other, it would just suddenly end. You would be walking and all of a sudden would end. It didn't have this thorough route going underneath the bridges. So you would have to walk up a staircase, cross one of these busy streets, and then go back down a staircase. You're going up, down, up, down, up, down if you want to utilize this thing all the way through, and you're wearing your legs out, and it didn't have anything fun to do. It was boring and unattractive, like all of my online dating life. So we brought it all down to the river's edge at the tune of about $100 million, by the way. And now you got cool things like this third space right here where you can see all these people chilling out. You see people eating their lunches and dinners throughout the summertime here. We got a lot of restaurants, as well as the Bridge House Museum, which shows you how all of these bridges actually work on the inside of it. Chicago has more movable drawbridges than anywhere in the world. We have 37 of them within our city limits, about 54 outside of the city, all the way down to the Calumet River. A couple of styles of architecture. Looking up here at the very top of this glass structure, hard to see since the sun is looking right at us, but you see those 30-degree angles of the rooftop. That's to mimic the Greek Parthenon. So Greek sculpture, classical design, so that is neoclassical design. 55 West Wacker right there, that was brutalism that we saw. Very short-lived architectural style from 1968, sort of petering off in the early 70s, meant to convey a moral high ground with all that concrete in your face. The FBI headquarters in America has brutalism in its architectural design. By the way, this building right here, remember I told you about Mayhem Like Me, the Allstate commercial. That was designed, or that was created by this advertisement firm there at 35 West Wacker. Leo Burnett, they're the ones who came up with the Marlboro Man, basically everything you've ever seen on a cereal box, Jolly Green Giant, and of course, once again, the Allstate commercials that we enjoy. Going underneath State Street Bridge. Now, State Street used to be a trail for Guron Hubbard to be able to transfer his pigs and cattle back and forth from Danville to Chicago.
It is. It's
one of the very first trails that we had in the city that was used for what would eventually become the meatpacking industry, now is a major commerce road. But look at that building over there, right-hand side, gold all the way up at the very top of it. That's 24 karat gold at the top. Half of the thickness of saran wrap. That's the carbide and carbon building, basically shaping like a giant champagne bottle with champagne cascading out the top of it. It was built in 1929. This is at the height of Prohibition. I don't know about you. You tell me I'm not supposed to do something. I'll tend to think about wanting to do that thing all the time. And in this case, they're not allowed to drink, so they're designing buildings to look like champagne bottles. Over here, this is basically what Chicago would look like if we never had any alleyways at all. Everything abutted right next to each other. This building with the tower is Mather Tower. Now, Alonzo Mather was the CEO of Mather Boxcars. He was also the descendant of Cotton Mather. Cotton Mather was an author and clergyman who drummed up a ton of hysteria to start up the Salem witch trials. Very small world. Right next to it, London House. London House used to be a very famous jazz club within American history. A who's who of jazz musicians had to play there if they were coming through here to Chicago. As a matter of fact, Frank Sinatra Jr., when he made his Chicago debut, had to play at the London House. And this whole area around us is the site of Fort Dearborn. This was the furthest western point of American territory in 1803. It ended up being demolished at the War of 1812. Henry Dearborn, who was the Secretary of War, living in Detroit, sent a ton of troops into this area because they had heard that a fur trading post would be taking place here in this land that the indigenous people called Chicago, which meant the land of the stinky onion. It was all garlic and onion fields, very marshy, and unusable land. Like I had said, the Chicago Tribune building. Also, I want to mention that this was the Chicago Tribune's contest winner. This design that we see here, the contest winner to design the most beautiful office space in the world. And it was won by Raymond Hood and John Howells. Raymond Hood ended up designing the 30 Rockefeller Center in New York City and was also the lead architect of the 1933 Century of Progress World's Fair that we had here in Chicago. And this whole area all the way around here, that Apple store specifically, that's the site of Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable's home and trading post. He was our very first non-native citizen in the city of Chicago, coming from New Orleans of Creole and Haitian descent, traveling all the way over here and landing in the spot, living a very prosperous and uninterrupted life for about 20 years, married a Potawatomi woman. And when he wanted to become a Potawatomi chief, they said no, so he said, all right, I think it's about time to get on out of here. The Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable, living in that location at the Apple store, our very first non-native citizen. MBC Tower to your left-hand side. This is Eco Deco architecture. Essentially, this is a replica of the 30 Rockefeller Center in New York, but it's only built with contemporary materials. So all of this is Eco Deco, as they like to call it. A lot of different daytime television shows being filmed inside of there. Jenny Jones show. Jerry Springer was also filmed in there. That's awesome. Not to mention also the Steve Harvey show before he ended up going to Los Angeles, and Judge Mathis, all being filmed inside. And I'm sure that they have the offices of all those Chicago PD and fire shows, all that Dick Wolf Productions taking place right there. Well, when you look at that, the cascading of that water going all the way from the north to the south, really quickly, we just went underneath the Columbus Drive Bridge. I believe that this is the longest drawbridge in the world right now, 536 feet all the way across. Longest drawbridge in the world. Certainly in the United States, I can say that for sure. All of this glass that we're looking at here on the left-hand side is bulletproof. All of this glass right here. Not to mention the top of the Sheraton Hotel, that's the building we're looking at. Top of the Sheraton Hotel has 2 different helicopter pads, a very beefed up security system, and also a ballroom that is the largest ballroom that we have in Chicago right now. Square footage of about an acre of land. So a lot of visiting dignitaries, as you can imagine, will be staying there, as well as any presidential nominees. How you doing? Tell all your friends what I told you today if you're staying there, all right? Somebody getting that tour for free over there, you know what I mean? Now, this cascading of water that we see over here, this is all coming out of Centennial Fountain. Centennial Fountain celebrate 100 years of the reversal of the river. It was constructed in 1989 for that centennial of us not drinking our own sewage water, essentially. And it was built by the grandson of the godfather of black box modernism architecture. His name was Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, taking off from Germany during basically before the onset of World War II. You can be able to see the writing on the wall. Ended up traveling to Chicago and establishing roots here and making those black box modernism buildings that we see all over the place. Not a lot to be able to talk about over here on the well, tons to talk about, but not a lot to look at, I would say, over here on your right-hand side. This is a good representation, however, of our Wecker Drive system. A lot of metropolitan areas will have underground tunnels working between buildings. Here we have an entire road system that takes place in between these buildings. If you notice, all of the buildings around us are about 3 stories higher than that of the river's edge. Again, all these roads working in between those buildings. and it has upper whacker, lower whacker in the middle, and lower whacker at the very bottom of it. Upper whacker was originally meant for carriage rides. This was before the advent of the automobile really taking shape and taking off. But that middle area, you are able, once again, to get between these buildings and roads that work north, south, east, and west. All of our road systems work on that grid system of going due north, south, east, or west. If you're ever on a diagonal street here in Chicago, the very high likelihood is that it was an indigenous people's trail. In fact, Clark Street, once it reaches North Avenue, it starts to diagonal up. It used to be called Green Bay Trail, which will take you all the way to Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Milwaukee Avenue did not go to the city with its namesake, but would be able to still go to Wisconsin as well. As you can imagine, a lot of, anytime they film a movie here in Chicago, they are filming in Wacker Drive, specifically the lower area underground. Blues Brothers have a chase scene in there, and also The Dark Knight, more contemporary times. As a matter of fact, the director of that movie, his name was Christopher Nolan, and he went to the city. He's like, I like to blow things up for real. Very, very little CGI at all. I want to bust up your concrete. I want to really film this thing for real down there. Is that going to be a problem? And the city said, have at it. We were looking to make renovations in there anyway, so go ahead. And that's how we got that awesome chase scene in that movie. Yeah. This building that is under construction right now, remember I told you over there at Wolf Point, that spiraling red sculpture that we saw built by Santiago Cravatelli called Constellation. He was going to build a building right there. He was also an architect, going to build a building 2,000 feet up in the air called the Chicago Spire, essentially spiraling all the way down to the very bottom. It looked like a giant drill bit, if you will, all the way up and down. But unfortunately, because of the financial crisis of 2008, it never got off ground. He ended up breaking ground on that site a year before that, 2007. Leaving us with a giant crater over there for the foundation for about 15 years plus, going 70 feet all the way down. This building right here now being built is going to be the 15th tallest within our skyline. We'll have a twin tower on the other side as well. But they just recently found some artifacts all the way down in the foundation, specifically a really long piece of wood that sort of bowed out like the bottom of a ship, in which all of the other pieces of wood connecting to that long piece in the middle would be. So the bow of a ship, essentially. And they had theorized, the city had theorized, that it was George Streeter's ship, the bow of his ship. George Streeter was this guy who, in a very fractional way, ended up creating some of the landmass that we see all the way up here. Basically, Chicago's lakefront was all the way over there at Michigan Avenue, where the land met the lake. That's why they call it Michigan Avenue, is because that's where Lake Michigan led to. But through a lot of different natural processes, there was a sandbar through here. They used to have piers that would encourage more and more of the land development. Not to mention the fact that with the Chicago fire taking place in 1871, a stretch of land of about 4 miles within its length, of 1 mile within its width, they had, and all of that burning down, they had to do something with all that debris, ended up shoving it into the lake, and land grew from out of that. As a matter of fact, if you go to Grant Park, that's exactly what happened over there. There was a causeway, basically elevated train tracks going out into the lake, since they were not allowed to build on the land, so they made a negotiation with the city to be able to build it out into the lake. This causeway started to create a stagnant lagoon of water between the landmass that is Chicago and those elevated railroad tracks. When the Chicago fire happened, they just started to shove all that debris into that stagnant lagoon, and land grew from out of it, and that's how we have Millennium Park and Grant Park today. How about that? Wow. But nonetheless, this guy by the name of George Streeter over there, he had ended up going on his maiden voyage of his boat called the Routond, by the encouragement of his wife, to start illegally running arms and ammo from Wisconsin all the way down to South America. He was going to go through the Chicago River and reach the Mississippi, go down through the Gulf of Mexico from there. And on their maiden voyage, they ended up hitting a storm and crashed into this sandbar area right over here, damaging their boat. And they went to the city and they said, hey, do you mind if we just stay here for a little while and fix up this boat? And the city said sure, and they never got rid of these people ever again. They got the bright-eyed idea that this was now their own sovereign land of this sandbar and their boat, and encouraged all these people in Chicago to start to dump their trash around their boat, creating a giant landfill in the middle of the lake and land crew from out of there. And that's how we have a little bit of this landmass right there. The neighborhood that surrounds it is called Streeterville, named after Mr. George Streeter.
Wow.
He sounds like an insane person to me, to be honest, and indeed I think that the records would show that he was. As a matter of fact, he was actually arrested for attempted murder when he shot, when the city had tried to evict him from his land. The cops came there, and it ended up being a shootout between them. He shoved his gun with buckshot. That's how he was able to be acquitted of the charges, because he wasn't using actual ammunition, just buckshot to try to scare him away. But anyways, enough about that weirdo. Enough about him. One last thing I want to bring up. We're looking at a Ferris wheel there in the distance over here at Navy Pier. We've always had a Ferris wheel here in the city of Chicago. We are the ones who came up with the idea of the Ferris wheel. Why? Because we were looking for a way to out-Eiffel the Eiffel Tower. This was at the tip of everybody's tongue. We got to out-Eiffel the Eiffel Tower. They said it a lot better than me. They didn't stutter when they said it. They said, we want to out-Eiffel the Eiffel Tower. And the reason why is because in 1893 we were slated to have our World's Fair. But 4 years before we had started planning for our World's Fair, Paris, France had their own World's Fair, and their crown jewel was a 1,000-foot tower of iron, the Eiffel Tower. So we were looking for a way to match that ingenuity. We had to have some sort of cornerstone piece for the whole thing. Enter in a man by the name of George Washington Gale Ferris. Mr. Gale Ferris was obsessed with water mills, the mechanics and physics of water mills, how they worked as a Pennsylvania youth. So he ended up applying that entire design to the Ferris wheel, spent all of his money and several other investors from Pennsylvania, so Chicago did not have to spend money on this thing at all. Ended up building it about 250 feet up in the air. What you see over there is about 160 feet. And what you ride inside of is called a gondola. Those right over there can be able to sit about 10 to 12 people, I would say, all enclosed and air conditioned. The original World's Fair Ferris wheel were converted Pullman train cars, giant box cars that could hold about 60 people comfortably, 45 seats, area for 15 more to be able to middle around. And also, all of them came equipped with a bar on the inside of it. So as enticing and awesome as all this sounds, people had never seen anything like it. They were scared to death of the thing when they first saw it. It took Ferris and his wife to to take the ride for the very first time. They went all the way up to the very top. She held out a little hanky up at the top and let everybody know we're all right up here. And people started to pile onto the thing, about the tune of $1 a ride. I think that this one over here is about $20, maybe $25. And I don't know how inflation rates really work for Ferris wheels from 1893 to now, but still a good ride. And I'll tell you this too, it's one of the couple of spots that we have within the city to be able to see a sunset. We get fantastic sunrises, obviously, with the lake, but because you have all these beautiful buildings obfuscating the views and it's all flat here, really hard to find unless you're in a building to be able to go all the way up to the top and see that sunset. There's a really great park on the south side of the city called Palomizio Park, built on a landfill that, if anybody is interested to be able to see it, it's beautiful now, around like 39th and Halsted, built on this landfill, actually has a quarry inside of it as well, but that gives you a lovely sight of the downtown area and then the sun setting in the west. And also a ton of Chinese places all the way around it, so if you're in the mood for good food and a sunset, I suggest Palomizio Park, but if you're staying in downtown, just enjoy a Ferris wheel ride for sure. We're hanging out here in this not quite in the lock system right now, but here in the Ogden Slip for a second. Getting ready to get into there, waiting for those gates to open. While we have a second, does anybody have any questions at all? Anything that I can answer for you? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll be walking around anyway, and I'm going to let you have your ears some rest. We'll play a little bit of music while we are getting ready to head inside of into the lock system. But I want to say thank you very much for listening to the tour today. I hope we all learned something, and thank you for being an attentive, sweet audience. I very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you much.
Awesome.